Commander Vex-Thon of the Galactic Defense Fleet adjusted his 6 eyes in what could only be described as supreme annoyance. 3 solar cycles. 3 entire solar cycles of monitoring this backwater planet called Earth. And what did his surveillance teams report? The humans had invented something called gunpowder weapons. Oh, how terrifyingly primitive. "Sir," squeaked his communications officer, a nervous Blytherin named Pip Qua, "the human settlement analysis is complete. They appear to have reached what we classify as primitive projectile phase." Vex-Thon's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Projectile phase? You mean they're still throwing pointy sticks at each other?" He leaned back in his command throne, all 4 arms gesturing dismissively. "And here, I thought we might actually encounter a species worth our time." The bridge of the stellar dominance hummed, with the quiet confidence of beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel, while these Earthlings were apparently still figuring out which end of a spear was dangerous. The ship itself was a marvel of Thraxian engineering, capable of reducing entire planets to cosmic dust with a single thought from its AI systems. "Actually, sir," Pip Qua continued, his voice trembling slightly, "they've moved beyond spears. Intelligence reports indicate they've developed something called firearms, chemical propulsion systems that launch metallic projectiles at high velocity." "Firearms!" Vex-Thon's laughter now echoed through the bridge, causing several junior officers to join in. "Oh, that's rich. They've managed to make their pointy sticks go bang instead of whoosh." He wiped a tear from one of his middle eyes. "What's next? Are they going to discover fire? The wheel, perhaps." Lieutenant Kexmora, his tactical officer, pulled up holographic displays showing various human conflicts. The images flickered between scenes of musket-wielding soldiers, primitive cannons, and what appeared to be very early rifle formations. "Sir, based on our historical comparative analysis, these humans are approximately 4,000 years behind our current military capabilities. Their most advanced weapons require manual reloading, have limited range, and appear to malfunction regularly." Kexmora's voice carried the professional disdain of someone who had witnessed the obliteration of 17 different civilizations. "Honestly, sir, a single Thraxian shock trooper could probably conquer their largest continent armed with nothing more than a standard plasma torch." The bridge crew erupted in appreciative chittering. Oh, how quaint these humans were! Still playing with chemical reactions, while the Galactic Defense Fleet wielded the power of controlled stellar energy and quantum phase disruptors. "Sir," interrupted Pip Qua, his blue-tinged skin now showing nervous purple blotches, "there is something else. Our deep scan protocols have detected some unusual energy, signatures from the planet's surface. Nothing that matches their primitive firearm technology, but..." "But what?" Vex-Thon's good humor was quickly evaporating. He hated interruptions, especially when they came with mysterious pauses. "Well, sir, there appear to be human settlements that don't show any thermal signatures consistent with gunpowder weapons. Some regions seem to be using older technologies. Much older." Kexmora leaned forward, her interest suddenly piqued. "Define older, communications officer." "Wooden implements, sir. Flexible wooden implements with fibrous strings. The energy signatures suggest stored potential energy release, but through organic materials rather than chemical combustion." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's fusion cores. Vex-Thon felt his confidence waver for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Wooden implements? You're telling me that while some humans have discovered gunpowder, others are still using." "What? Wooden clubs? Not clubs, sir. The objects appear to be curved, with tensioned strings. They seem to be launching smaller wooden projectiles over considerable distances. The commander's mandibles clicked in renewed amusement. Even better. So not only are these humans primitive, they can't even agree on which primitive technology to use. He stood up, all four arms spreading wide in a gesture of mock grandeur. Some have discovered the mighty power of exploding powder, while others are still playing with bent sticks and string. The crew's laughter filled the bridge once more. Here was a species so backward that different regions were using technologies separated by what their xenoarchaeologists would probably classify as different developmental epochs. "Sir," ventured Kexmora, "should we perhaps conduct a more detailed analysis of these wooden implement regions? Standard protocol suggests." "Standard protocol?" Vex-Thon cut her off with a wave of his primary right arm. "For a species that's playing with sticks and stones? I think not, Lieutenant. We have 14 other systems to survey before the next galactic cycle, and I'd prefer not to waste time cataloging every primitive tool these humans have managed to cobble together." But something nagged at him. In his 37 years of service, Vex-Thon had learned to trust certain instincts. True, humans seemed laughably primitive, but the galaxy had taught him that the universe occasionally enjoyed pulling very unpleasant surprises on those who became too comfortable. "Actually," he said, settling back into his command throne, "let's have a bit of fun with this. Pipqua, select one of these wooden implement settlements. Something small and isolated. We'll conduct what the regulations call a preliminary interaction assessment." The communications officer's blotches shifted from purple to deep orange, a sure sign of anxiety. "Sir, preliminary interaction assessments require formal authorization from Fleet Command, extensive cultural preparation protocols, and approximately 6 months of bureaucratic nonsense," Vex-Thon finished. "Which is why we're going to conduct an unofficial preliminary interaction assessment. Nothing formal, nothing logged. Just a quick demonstration of superior firepower to satisfy our curiosity about these wooden sticks." Kexmora looked up from her tactical displays. "Sir, are you suggesting we initiate first contact?" "I'm suggesting we introduce ourselves to whatever backward tribe is still playing with bent wood, while their more advanced neighbors have moved on to proper explosions." His mandibles clicked rapidly, indicating either amusement or anticipation. "Besides, it'll be educational for the crew, a chance to observe how truly primitive species react when confronted with genuine technological superiority." The bridge buzzed with excitement. Most of the crew had joined the Galactic Defense Fleet hoping for adventure, but their duties typically involved intimidating already spacefaring civilizations or conducting routine patrols. The opportunity to witness first contact with a pre-industrial species was the kind of experience that made for excellent stories during leave rotations. "Helm, take us into the outer atmosphere," Vex-Thon commanded. "Tactical, I want full scans of the surface populations. Find me a nice, isolated settlement of these stick and string enthusiasts. Something with maybe a few hundred individuals, close to water, probably agricultural based on the energy patterns." "Aye, sir," came the responses from across the bridge. As the stellar dominance descended through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced shielding systems rendering it invisible to primitive human detection methods, Vex-Thon felt a familiar thrill. There was something uniquely satisfying about being the most technologically advanced being in a several light-year radius. "Contact, sir," announced Kexmora. "Settlement approximately 200 kilometers from the largest landmass's eastern coast. Population roughly 400 individuals. energy signatures consistent with pre-industrial agriculture, but with high concentrations of those wooden implement readings. Perfect. Vex-Thon rubbed his hands together, a gesture he'd picked up during previous interactions with humanoid species. Pipqua, prepare standard first contact translation protocols. I want to be able to communicate with these people, assuming they've developed language beyond grunting and pointing. Translation matrices ready, sir. Linguistic analysis suggests a complex verbal structure, surprisingly sophisticated for their technological level. Surprisingly sophisticated. Vex-Thon's good mood dimmed slightly. Define sophisticated. Well, sir, their language patterns suggest abstract reasoning, mathematical concepts, tactical terminology, and what appears to be highly developed strategic vocabulary. The commander felt that nagging sensation again. Strategic vocabulary? For a species that plays with wooden sticks? Yes, sir. Extensive terminology related to what our translation systems identify as battlefield tactics, coordinated movement patterns, and target acquisition methodologies. Kexmora looked up from her displays with a slight frown creasing her chitinous brow. Sir, the settlement's population distribution is unusual. Unusual how? The thermal signatures don't match typical agricultural settlements. Instead of being clustered around farming areas, the population is distributed in what appears to be defensive positions, elevated locations, sight lines to potential approach routes, coordinated patrol patterns. Vex-Thon felt his excitement begin to mix with the first whispers of unease. Are you telling me this primitive settlement is arranged like a military installation? Not like a military installation, sir. It appears to actually be a military installation that also happens to grow food. The bridge fell silent except for the persistent humming of ship systems. Through the main view screen, Earth's blue and green surface seemed suddenly less quaint and more mysterious. Sir, Pipqua's voice had dropped to almost a whisper. There's something else. The wooden implements? They're not just scattered randomly throughout the settlement. Where are they? Every single adult thermal signature in the settlement is carrying one. And, sir? They all appear to be pointed in our direction. Commander Vex-Thon stared at the view screen for a long moment, his 6 eyes adjusting independently, as if trying to see something that wasn't quite there. That's impossible, he said finally. We're cloaked. There's no way a pre-industrial species could detect a ship using quantum phase stealth technology. Confirmed, sir. All stealth systems are functioning normally. According to our instruments, we're completely invisible to any detection method available to a civilization at their technological level. But even as Pipqua spoke those words, the tactical display showed something that made everyone on the bridge suddenly very quiet. The thermal signatures in the settlement below weren't just pointing weapons in their direction. They were tracking the ship's movement. Vex-Thon's mandibles clicked rapidly, but not from amusement this time. Helm, adjust course 30 degrees starboard. On the display, 400 human thermal signatures adjusted their aim 30 degrees starboard. Helm, full reverse. The thermal signatures tracked backward. Vertical climb, maximum angle. Every single human weapon signature tilted upward. Sir, Kexmora's voice was barely audible. I don't think those are sticks. Before Commander Vex-Thon could respond, something hit the Stellar Dominance's hull with enough force to shake a ship designed to withstand the gravitational stresses of star hopping. Then something else hit it. Then 20-something else's hit it simultaneously. And through the main view screen, Vex-Thon got his first clear look at what humans called wooden implements with fibrous strings. They were bows, Recurved, composite, engineered bows in the hands of people who had clearly spent their entire lives learning exactly how to use them. And the wooden projectiles weren't just sticks. They were arrows. Arrows with what appeared to be some kind of metallic tips that were somehow penetrating shields designed to repel plasma weaponry. "Shields down 15%, Kexmora shouted over the sound of impacts against the hull. How is that possible? But Vex-Thon was staring at the tactical display in growing horror. Because now he could see what the settlement really was. Not a farming village with a few wooden weapons. It was a fortress. A fortress full of what his instruments were now identifying as professional soldiers carrying weapons that had been perfected over thousands of years by a species that had apparently spent most of its developmental history figuring out increasingly creative ways to kill things at a distance. "Sir," Pipqua's voice cracked with panic. "I'm receiving a transmission from the surface." "Put it through." The voice that came through the ship's communication system was calm, measured, and spoke Galactic standard with an accent that suggested the speaker had been expecting this conversation for quite some time. "Greetings, visitors from above. My name is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Corps, 3rd Archery Division. You are currently being targeted by 400 combat archers using tungsten-tipped arrows, designed specifically for penetrating energy shields." Vex-Thon tried to speak, but only managed a strangled clicking sound. "We've been waiting for you." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the stellar dominance in stunned silence, broken only by the continuing impacts of arrows against a hull that was supposed to be impenetrable. And in that moment, Commander Vex-Thon realized that perhaps, just perhaps, his understanding of the word primitive needed some serious reconsideration. Shields down to 70% and falling. Kexmora's voice cut through the chaos as another volley of arrows struck their supposedly impenetrable defense systems. "Sir, these projectiles are somehow bypassing our quantum matrix." Commander Vex-Thon stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Each arrow impact showed as a tiny pinprick of energy, barely registering on their sensors, yet somehow these pinpricks were systematically dismantling technology that had taken his civilization 3 millennia to perfect. "How?" he whispered, then louder, "How?" "Sir," Pipqua stammered, his communication array sparking with each new impact. "Incoming transmission from the surface. They're requesting permission to board." "Permission to what?" Vex-Thon's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like a malfunctioning data processor. "They want to board? With what? Wooden ladders?" The answer came in the form of 20 humans rising from concealed positions around the settlement. Not climbing, not using jetpacks or anti-gravity devices. Rising on what appeared to be fabric wings attached to wooden frames. "Hang gliders," Kexmora read from her rapidly updating database. "Primitive atmospheric flight devices using wind currents and basic aerodynamics." Primitive? Vex-Thon watched in fascination and growing terror as the humans soared upward with the practiced ease of beings who had turned atmospheric flight into an art form. Each glider pilot carried what looked like a smaller version of the ground-based bows, along with a quiver full of those impossible arrows. "Sir, they're gaining altitude faster than our combat algorithms predicted possible for unpowered flight." "Then use powered flight to get us out of here," Vex-Thon snapped. "Maximum altitude now." "Attempting compliance, sir, but—" The helmsman's voice trailed off as warning lights began flashing across his console. "Sir, the navigation system is malfunctioning. Something is interfering with our stellar positioning matrix." Through the view screen, Vex-Thon could see more humans emerging from what he had initially assumed was forest cover. Except it wasn't forest cover. It was camouflage. Elaborate, sophisticated camouflage that had completely fooled sensors designed to detect heat signatures through solid rock. And each newly revealed human was carrying a bow. "Sir!" Pipqua's communication station erupted in a shower of sparks. "They're jamming our communications. But sir, the jamming signal, it's not electronic." "What do you mean it's not electronic?" "It's acoustic, sir. They're using sound waves, coordinated sound waves generated by what appears to be musical instruments." On the screen, Vex-Thon could indeed see humans with various wind and percussion instruments arranged in precise formations. The music they were producing sounded almost ceremonial, but his ship's computer was frantically reporting communication failures across all standard frequencies. "They're using music to jam our communications?" Vex-Thon felt reality sliding away from him like sand through his claws. "That's impossible." "Sir!" Kexmora's voice was barely controlled panic now. "The humans in the air are preparing to land on our hull. And, sir, their arrows are attached to what looks like climbing rope." The first human landed on the stellar dominance with a soft thump that shouldn't have been audible through their advanced hull materials. But somehow it was. And then another thump. And another. "Hull breach in Section 7, someone screamed from across the bridge. "Hull breach? From arrows?" "No, sir. From the humans. They're cutting through our hull with hand tools." On the tactical display, Vex-Thon watched in horrified fascination as tiny human figures moved across his ship's exterior with the casual confidence of beings who apparently considered assault-boarding alien spacecraft to be a routine Tuesday afternoon activity. "Hand tools?" he managed to croak. "Some kind of metallic blades, sir. They appear to be heating the metal using friction and leverage to cut through our quantum-bonded hull materials." "That's impossible. Our hull is designed to withstand direct hits from antimatter torpedoes." "Yes, sir, but apparently not designed to withstand humans with very sharp knives and an alarming amount of patience." The ship shuddered as more sections reported hull breaches. Vex-Thon's instruments showed that the humans had somehow mapped his ship's entire structural layout and were systematically targeting weak points with surgical precision. "Sir," Pipqua announced with the tone of someone whose worldview had completely collapsed, "the surface commander is requesting to speak with you again." "Put her through." Captain Elena Vasquez's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional despite the fact that her people were literally carving their way into an advanced alien spacecraft with what amounted to fancy kitchen cutlery. "Commander Vex-Thon of the Thraxian Defense Fleet, I presume?" "How do you know my name?" Vex-Thon whispered. "We've been monitoring your communications since you entered our solar system. Your translation protocols work both ways, you know. We've been listening to your crew discuss how primitive and backward we are for the last several hours." That's impossible. You don't have the technology to intercept quantum-encrypted communications using advanced translation matrices?" Captain Vasquez's voice carried a hint of amusement. "You're right, we don't. But we do have something your civilization apparently never developed, which is pattern recognition, patience, and about 6,000 years of experience in figuring out how to kill things that think they're better than us." Another section of hull gave way, and Vex-Thon could hear something that made his blood freeze in his veins. Human voices, speaking calmly, inside his ship. "Sir," Kexmora reported with the detached professionalism of someone in complete shock, "the humans have reached Deck 12 and are proceeding toward the bridge. They appear to be following our ship's schematic with perfect accuracy. How do they have our schematics? Unknown, sir, but they're moving through our corridors like they've been here before. Captain Vasquez's voice returned, now with an edge that suggested she was getting tired of explaining obvious things to slow students. Commander, your ship's design is actually quite similar to vessels we've encountered before. Different technology, same basic principles. The Zelthari used quantum phase stealth as well. The Zelthari? Vex-Thon felt his heart skip several beats. You've encountered the Zelthari? Encountered them, fought them, defeated them, sent them home with a message for anyone else who might be thinking about visiting Earth without proper diplomatic protocols. But the Zelthari are a Class 7 civilization. They have weaponry that can crack moons. Yes, they mentioned that, right before we introduced them to our orbital defense network. Orbital defense network? Our scans showed no artificial satellites. That's because you were looking for satellites. We prefer a more organic approach to orbital defense. Through the main view screen, Vex-Thon suddenly noticed something that his instruments had somehow missed during their initial survey. High in the atmosphere, barely visible against the blue sky, were what looked like birds. Except birds didn't fly in perfect formation. And birds definitely didn't carry small objects that his computer was now identifying as aerodynamically optimized projectiles. Are those trained birds? Peregrine falcons, actually. Fastest birds on the planet. We've been working with them for about 3,000 years. They're quite good at dropping things onto targets from high altitude. You've weaponized birds? We've weaponized everything, Commander. The question isn't what we've turned into a weapon. The question is what we haven't. The bridge doors opened with a soft hiss, and 3 humans walked in as calmly as if they were arriving for a scheduled meeting. They wore simple leather and cloth garments, carried those impossible bows, and moved with the fluid grace of apex predators who had never encountered anything they couldn't handle. The leader, presumably Captain Vasquez, was a woman with graying hair and scars that suggested a lifetime of combat experience. She looked around the bridge with professional interest, nodded approvingly at the design, and then focused her attention on Vex-Thon, with eyes that seemed to catalog every weakness he possessed. "Impressive ship," she said conversationally. "The artificial gravity is particularly well engineered. Much better than the Craxton vessels we dealt with last year." The Craxton? Vex-Thon's voice was barely a whisper now. "You've fought the Craxton?" "Fought them, captured 12 of their ships, reverse-engineered their technology, and sent them a very polite thank-you note, along with a detailed explanation of why they should probably find a different planet to invade." She walked over to his command console and examined it with the casual interest of someone window shopping. "You know, Commander, your civilization makes the same mistake they all do. You assume that technological advancement follows a single path. Bigger guns, faster ships, more destructive weapons. That's how progress works," Vex-Thon managed. "For some species, perhaps. Humans took a different approach. We perfected the art of making simple things extraordinarily effective. These bows, for instance." She gestured to the weapon slung across her shoulder. "The basic design is over 40,000 years old, but we've spent all that time learning exactly how to use them." One of her companions, a younger man with calloused hands and scars along his arms, stepped forward. "Captain, the ship's weapon systems are more advanced than the Zelthari configuration. Should we disable them?" "Please," Captain Vasquez nodded. "Use the standard approach." The man pulled an arrow from his quiver, examined the tip with professional interest, and then inserted it into what Vex-Thon recognized as his ship's main weapon control matrix. There was a small spark, a puff of smoke, and every weapon system on the stellar dominance went offline. How? Vex-Thon stared at the smoking console. How did an arrow disable a quantum phase disruptor array? Same way we disabled your shields, your communications, and your navigation systems, the young man replied cheerfully. We spent a lot of time studying how your technology works. Then we figured out where to poke it with sharp objects to make it stop working. Captain Vasquez settled into what appeared to be a spare chair, looking perfectly comfortable on an alien bridge surrounded by beings who could, theoretically, tear her apart with their bare hands. The thing is, Commander, every advanced civilization makes the same assumption. They think that because they can destroy planets, they're automatically superior to anyone who can't. But destructive power isn't the same as combat effectiveness. We could have destroyed your entire planet. Could you? She tilted her head thoughtfully. Your ship carries enough firepower to crack a continent, certainly. But could you have actually used it? Of course we could have. Against a species that had already infiltrated your ship, disabled your weapons, and taken your command crew hostage? She smiled, and Vex-Thon realized that everything that had happened had been carefully orchestrated. Commander, you've been our prisoners since the moment you entered our atmosphere. We just let you figure that out gradually to avoid unnecessary panic. That's impossible. We're a superior civilization. Superior at building big, complicated things, certainly. But we're superior at figuring out how to break big, complicated things using small, simple things. And more importantly, we're superior at working together. She gestured toward the main view screen, where Vex-Thon could now see the true scope of what they had encountered. What he had initially taken for a single settlement was actually part of a vast network of interconnected defensive positions stretching across multiple continents. Thousands of humans, all armed with those deceptively simple bows, all coordinated by a communication system that used everything from music to trained birds to relay information. How many of you are there? He whispered. On this planet? About 8 billion. In this particular defensive network? About 2 million. All of them trained from childhood in the use of weapons that your civilization never bothered to study, because you assumed they were primitive. 8 billion soldiers? Oh no, Commander. 8 billion humans. We don't really distinguish between soldiers and civilians the way most species do. When someone threatens our planet, we're all soldiers. Vex-Thon looked around his bridge, where his crew sat in stunned silence, and realized that everything he thought he knew about military superiority had just been turned upside down by a species that had somehow turned wooden sticks and string into weapons capable of defeating technology that could reshape stars. What happens now? He asked quietly. Captain Vasquez stood up, slinging her bow across her shoulder with practiced ease. Now, Commander, you get to make a choice. You can return to your fleet and report that Earth is inhabited by a primitive species armed with wooden weapons. Or you can return to your fleet and report that Earth is defended by 8 billion humans who have spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of warfare, and who consider your advanced technology to be an interesting but ultimately irrelevant curiosity. And if we choose the first option, then the next fleet that arrives here will encounter the same surprise you did, except they'll be facing humans who have had time to reverse engineer your technology and figure out new ways to integrate it with weapons that actually work. And the second option? We send you home with a message for your leaders, along with detailed schematics for our orbital defense network examples of our weapons technology, and a standing invitation for proper diplomatic relations between our species. Vex-Thon considered his options. He could return to the Galactic Defense Fleet and admit that he had been comprehensively outmaneuvered by beings using weapons that predated spaceflight. Or he could return with information about a species that had somehow managed to defeat every advanced civilization that had ever threatened them, using nothing more than ingenuity, coordination, and an apparently unlimited capacity for turning anything into a weapon. "The message," he said finally. "What would it say?" Captain Vasquez smiled, and for the first time since this encounter began, it was a genuinely warm expression. "Welcome to Earth, Commander. Next time, try knocking first." 3 months later, Commander Vex-Thon stood before the Galactic Defense Council, delivering a report that would fundamentally change how advanced civilizations viewed the concept of primitive species. "In conclusion," he said, addressing an audience of the most militarily sophisticated beings in the galaxy, "I recommend that Earth be classified as a Class 12 defensive civilization, with a formal recommendation that no military action be taken against the planet under any circumstances." Class 12? The Council leader's translator couldn't quite convey the shock in her voice. "That's the same classification we use for species with stellar manipulation capabilities." "Yes, Counselor. Based on their demonstrated ability to defeat superior technology through tactical innovation, strategic coordination, and weapons optimization, I believe the classification is appropriate." "But they're using bows and arrows." Vex-Thon looked at the assembled representatives of 17 different advanced civilizations, beings who controlled fleets capable of reshaping galaxies, and smiled. "Respectfully, Counselor, I think that's exactly the point." And somewhere on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, Captain Elena Vasquez was teaching a new class of recruits the ancient art of making simple things extraordinarily effective, while overhead, trained falcons circled in perfect formation, ready to deliver their payloads to anyone who might mistake simplicity for weakness.